Greetings everyone, welcome to the BlastCast. I am Jarvis, and with me as always is the man excited for CitizenCon, Lightning Dragon.
Yes, hear the enthusiasm in my voice.
So let's get into some Star Citizen news. Now for starters, at the time of this recording, oddly enough, the Calling All Devs isn't out yet, so I have no idea. It's kind of odd. So let's just jump into Around the Verse. And Around the Verse, from what it sounds like, they were talking about the fact that the Gravlev bikes are no longer going to have an atmospheric flight mode because it sounds like it was ruining their racing they were trying to do, which was kind of obvious if you thought about it from the beginning. And a lot of people weren't happy that the Gravlev bikes had atmospheric flight because even in the initial Q&A, it was stated that they would not be able to do that. It was a big selling point, and turning them into basically small, tiny spaceships was a bad idea from the very beginning. And I hope this is not just a racing thing with a disabled flight. I hope it's universal. That would make the bikes more like bikes.
Darn, they're going to remove flight from tiny vehicles that no one asked for.
CIG also showed off some of their tech that will help define what the players see as they move along inside and outside of ships, and some of the updates to that tech that allows the shapes to more accurately fit the rooms that it's supposed to represent.
Less stuff being drawn in, better FPS.
Now, hangars will most likely be non-instanced and permanent on worlds, meaning related to real estate. That means that these hangars, the cost will go up as the availability goes down. Now, realistically speaking, there's enough room on one planet for every player. I think they said to have roughly 4 kilometers, so every player could actually inhabit one planet. But what they're talking about here is, for example, a city will have an area where there's a bunch of hangars, and players can buy or rent hangars at that location. They want to make those very permanent, so of course that would be limited. You can go out and prospect your own location and then build your own house, and I assume put your own hangar out there too. Now, what they should do for these large public hangars, I don't know if any of you have ever seen this, I'll play some footage. When I lived in Japan, you would have these parking garages that cars would go into this certain slot, this certain little room that would be picked up and then moved into a larger car storage area. If they did this with ships for like public parking, that would resolve a lot of issues. They don't have to animate the inside, but they could just kind of make a big outside and say that's kind of what it does.
You could also look at it as even a more modern thing, like an aircraft carrier, right? Aircraft carriers have, multiple decks where, ammo is stored, or ships are stored, or planes in this case. So even if you just had like let's say more like a skyscraper, maybe half buried or something, that's what your hangar is. So you have like a upper area you could land, maybe that goes down. We saw that with the asteroid hangar, or something you fly into, and then it would have some kind of like, the ship goes down. Then you don't have to, animate any of that. Well, you don't have to draw all the ships in that you own, but you'd have like a certain amount of ships you could store in that one hangar, obviously in a certain size. If you want a capital ship, you're not going to land them on a planet. Yeah, but the great thing about video games is that, they could just have one building, because are any of us really going to know how many ships are in there? Yeah, it's a video game. I mean, all it is data. It's a line of code. Now, my question related to these hangars, because they want to incorporate your personal hangar into the world, where you place it down, is do I get a free hangar for every hangar on every ship that I have bought that includes a hangar? Because that's a lot of hangars. They got into long-range sensors just a little bit, and they stated that long-range sensors are going to be the kind of thing where you kind of sit there, you scan, you take time to put all the data together, refine that data, and then determine exactly what it is. It's going to be a lot slower than the short-range scans where it's more of a ping and then you get the data back. The long-range ones are going to be analysis, which I think is great. I guess it depends on how long it's going to take to scan these things. Obviously, we now have like computers as a size, and hopefully we'll get like a classification, overclocking, more details than just that. Because that's something that's like, think of like replacing certain parts, and now it's an overclock thing. Well, that could be like a 1% improvement if there's people that actually do overclocking. If that can tie into the ship computers in some fashion, I think that'd make an interesting kind of thing. So you could customize your ship for more long-range scanning as opposed to like short-range scanning or something along those lines. Yeah. There's a lot of possibilities of upgrades or modifications that ships can be allowed to have. It just depends on the developer's imagination. And they also talked a bit about long-range ships, and that they have to refuel either at a station or through something like the Starfarer. Now, my question is on that is, if you take something like a Karak out and you're exploring a new system, and there's nothing out there because you just discovered it. You found a wormhole, you went through. Who's going to refuel you?
Who's going to help you get back?
Going where no one has gone before.
Right. So, in my opinion, long-range ships should have something like a Mr. Fusion.
I need fuel. Go ahead, quick, get in the car.
Basically, you can take whatever materials that you need and process it slowly into a renewable quantum fuel source. Just enough that you can make a small quantity and transfer it over to your tanks, and then get more of the raw materials you need to make some additional. The reason is that these exploration ships that are going to be going into these locations and finding these places, they need to have some sort of self-sufficiency. Otherwise, there's just going to be a bunch of dead ships out in deep space.
You could also have it where it's inefficient.
Yeah.
Like the smaller it is, the more inefficient it is. So while it's able to, let's say you like a harvest of gas. Here's a nebula over here. We're going to go to this. And, let's say it's only at 10% out of like the total area. So if it's a very low dense, you're only going to get 10% of that. And then maybe 50% of that is what you're actually getting. So you might have to sit out here in this nebula or by a gas giant or something for a while, but at least you'll be able to keep going. Where if you go up in size for like a Starfarer, maybe your scoop is like 50% and it's like 90% or 80% efficiency, so you're not losing a lot of that from the reprocessing. So they could balance it like that.
But I definitely think they need to consider something for those people who want to do deep space exploration, and especially if they find a new system that no one's been in before. Otherwise, the risks are too high. Because they've talked about wanting to have the players refuel every few hours. And that seems to be kind of a weird statement. It should be based on what you're doing and also the capacity of your ship, not, I don't know. It seems odd.
I agree.
So someone had asked the developers if they wanted to have stories that basically blossomed out of the persistent universe, basically where developers could act like GMs and create scenarios and complex situations that would evolve into long-running storylines. And it is actually something they're looking at and they may want to pursue, and I'm all for that. The difficulties in dealing with that in an MMO environment, it can be exclusionary to some extent. Like, you remember when we played
Guild Wars?
Yeah, Guild Wars 2. They had those one-time event only things, and I know they've changed that now, but initially it was very disheartening because if you had a bad internet connection or if it was too busy and you couldn't get in, you miss out on the event and it's gone. So that's
I think the first one they did, it was like 2 days, but in those 2 days, it was only like 4 hours of the day, and it was like towards the end of the day.
Yeah, and I was at work, so it was like impossible to get it done right.
Yeah, it's like, some people do work night shifts or second shifts, so they can't be here for that. And I think it was like a Sunday and a Monday. And I think you were able to be there once, but only for like an hour. And it was like, I think the servers actually like crashed because how many people were on, and they actually had to extend the day for another like 1 or 2 days.
It was actually when the experiences made me quit the game.
Yeah.
I was like, if they're going down this road, I don't want to deal with this. I can't deal with one-time events that I probably can't access because either the servers are broken or I'm at work. So that's something to consider. Maybe when they're dealing with storylines, they should look at maybe more generic directions, like the players have been pushing this way, these kind of events have been happening, and then you change the dynamics of the game around that. So like, for example, if the players for some reason get together and they attack the UEE in a particular system, then maybe how the game responds to that, what the devs do is they have the UEE counter with a massive military force coming into that system. So you make adjustments within that in a broad scope, depending upon what players are doing. Individualistic kind of stories and things like that might be really difficult, exclusionary, and alienating for a lot of players, speaking from personal experience. Either way, I'm very hopeful that they do get involved in the direction of the persistent universe, the evolution of the way things are, based upon what players do. The last thing here is that they did talk a bit about the no-fly zones, and the best way I can describe this is something that will make Homer Simpson proud is a bit like a donut. Little channels are going to be made where you can fly in and towards a landing zone. And if you cross into these red zones, or the ring of the donut, if you will, as you get closer and closer, you're going to receive warnings. So eventually you hit, as they said, an explosion zone where your ship just blows up. Now that's an initial kind of way they're going to be implementing it. Now eventually what I'd like to see them do is if you cross over, you get a criminal status, or maybe like, I don't know, say you were trying to take a Cessna and fly to the White House, you know how that's going to end up. You're going to be pretty much blown up. So the same kind of thing as they develop this, I'd like to see them like, okay, now you've received a fine for crossing a line. Okay, now you're clearly a threat, and now we shoot you down. Kind of a progression. An invisible hard wall, I'm not really a big fan of. As I said, Tier 0 implementation, but please only be Tier 0.
Yeah, usually that falls into the taking control away from the player, which is something I'm a big negative against.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, even if you go into the full red zone where everyone's shooting at you, you should still have a chance to get away. You know, you may be a fully wanted criminal now for violating that fly space. But the point is that, you know, there should be like turrets and cops and whatever has to happen to get you out of there. But yeah, it should definitely be a soft experience, not a hard wall one. All right, everyone, from what I've seen in the forums, it looks like the Evo Kadi invites have started going out. There's been a lot of them from what I've been seeing on the forums. I would guess that, and I don't know, because two things. Well, one, honestly, I haven't heard anything. And two, even if I did, I couldn't tell you, or I'd have to kill you. I would imagine for stress testing the new netcode and the data calling that they're going to want to try to pile in on as many people as they can. So I would guess that's why additional invites are going out to the extent that I'm seeing them, at least according to the forums. So I would expect Evo Kadi to be within 2 to 3 weeks, most likely within 2, because they're going to want to have probably about a month to get everything up and running, release a PTU version by CitizenCon. I don't expect them to go live with it fully by CitizenCon, just at least the subscribers and things like that. We don't really have any official plans for any shows this week, so we'll do some thinking on it and decide from there. But other than that, guys, I think that's about everything for this day's BlastCast, so we will catch you in the next one. Thanks for tuning in, and leave your comments down below.
Bye-bye, everybody.